over the years, I didn't realize how much I still didn't understand about myself and like my life experiences until now. Hello, truth tellers. Welcome back to the ADHD Scapegoat Podcast. I'm Angie.
I'm Jeremy.
So, when I was diagnosed with ADHD 15 years ago, when I was 28, I thought, all right, cool. That explains a lot. Like, it clicked, and I remember being like confused because I had always thought it was something that boys were diagnosed with. I thought it was just in kids at that time. Really, I hadn't even considered it being why I was struggling. But over the years, I didn't realize how much I still didn't understand about myself and like my life experiences until now. So after a recent deep dive reevaluation with a great psychiatric nurse practitioner, I finally have that more complete picture of things that I've carried my whole life, and have really felt deeply over the past, 4 to 5 years in doing my healing work. And the truth is that the diagnosis really isn't about giving it a label necessarily. The label is for me to grow my understanding. The label doesn't equal an excuse, which toxic people will claim. It's just an explanation, and now it's my job to work through it. Even if I didn't cause my ADHD, I didn't cause any of these things, but it's, okay, this is what this looks like. This explains where I'm struggling. It's just like, any diagnosis for a disease or, any diagnosis. It's just for you to understand more and be able to, live your life with that.
Right.
As you need
Treat
to.
it. Deal with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if it's something that you could cure, then you go about it that way, right? Like there's all those different avenues, but the diagnosis is just like, okay, here's the reality. This is what we found and this is what you need.
Right.
So today I'm going to kind of talk about that, my own evaluation experience, kind of why an accurate diagnosis is crucial for your healing, and really understanding why the full picture is the only way to support yourself and your kids and your family, everyone around you, in a meaningful way.
Yeah. So you said that you were first diagnosed at 28. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I know that. What did and didn't that answer for you?
So it made complete sense to me. Like I said, when she said it, I was like, oh my gosh. And like she explained some of the symptoms that I had, explained to her in our conversation that, obviously I didn't pinpoint it on anything. I had no direction. I was just like, these are my struggles. And she asked me about my childhood, in what ways did these symptoms show up, in what situations, different things like that. So it made complete sense, even though I had never even considered it. But it was like a massive aha moment. Like the years of self-blame and like masking and being misdiagnosed with depression twice, like over-functioning, over-explaining, like doing so much with very little results, or, in relationships, getting very little in return, feeling like I just, at the end of the day, and I've talked about this, but I will talk about, like, you get to the point where, like, at the end of you start off your day so positive and like ready to take on the day, and then by the end of the day you're feeling like a failure. So
just
yeah,
really defeated.
Yeah.
What prompted the re-diagnosis?
So perimenopause symptoms, truly. as well as my family situation, because, stepping away from those harmful relationships by setting boundaries and ultimately going no contact with many of them, I realized like it wasn't just my ADHD. I think that there's definitely more to this that I need to talk about. And in doing my healing, and that's part of the thing that I did a previous episode about being a late diagnosis and how, my ADHD was like, to me, when I was diagnosed, I don't remember telling anyone, and you can go back and listen to that episode too. I talk more in detail about it, but I don't remember telling them, but I know the feeling I had. It was like, oh, like now they're also gonna be like, aha, okay, this makes a lot of sense. Let's move forward together, right? So that was like the idea that I had. And then when all of this stuff with my family's going on, I was like, wait, what? Like, you should understand. And that's why for a long time I was like, they just don't understand ADHD. Like, maybe if I just like explain this to them and help them understand, like maybe they're still confused. And then I did that over and over and over and over and over. And then it was like, oh, they don't want to understand. This isn't about me. This isn't my ADHD. Like, they knew that I cared and I wanted a connection and I would self-reflect and do that work to figure out what was going on. I got the ADHD diagnosis, so I will take on whatever the problem is and I will look at it and I will try to figure out how I can fix it. They didn't have to do anything, right?
Right.
So that's part of it.
Yeah. How was the process of getting a full neuropsychological assessment different this time than it was when you were 28?
I mean, I have been with my same therapist since 2018, and I've been talking to her about it for a while and just, even bringing up like probably about 2 years ago-ish, like I feel like these symptoms are actually like perimenopause symptoms. Like I've never, experienced, this mood shift, even around my menstrual cycle. It was never really something that affected me before. And so I had talked to her about it, and Attitude Magazine actually has an amazing resource, called it's like I think I wrote it. Yeah, Menstrual Cycle Workbook. And it's awesome because it shows all your ADHD symptoms and during which time of the month, they're getting worse and they kind of actually give you things like,
Connect the dots and crosswords. And...
No.
Oh, different type of workbook. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So they're doing like, rate your symptoms on this scale during this time. And it kind of even tells you like during this chunk of days, try to do tasks that aren't as, brain heavy or whatever, like kind of do some less taxing tasks, because your cognitive abilities are going to be down when your estrogen is dropping, because estrogen helps move your neurotransmitters. It's like it's a huge supporter of your neurotransmitters. So.
Have you done those things? Have you followed that? And has it helped?
Yeah, and I think part of the problem with perimenopause is your menstrual cycle is all over the place. So it is kind of hard to track, but you definitely can see, and it helps you understand, because I think sometimes you can feel like, oh, I'm always tired, or I never can concentrate, when in reality, it's like this chunk of time I can't. And then there's other times where, oh, I'm back, I'm good to go, and I can totally focus, but it definitely fluctuates, and it's just good to like be prepared and understand, hey, that's coming. Like if I'm planning ahead or what work I'm going to tackle, I can like look at it like that. But I'd been talking to her about it. And like, again, I was like, my frustration was growing and, all these positive outcomes and growing knowledge and things that, like, being a coach, I have all the tools, right? But so it's like I intellectually know what to do, but I'm still struggling. And I just wanted to struggle less. And I felt like, not only like the medication I was on prior was working, I feel like it's not now. And I feel like, there's got to be a better way. And I always talk about the way I kind of don't sit, and that's why depression was a hard diagnosis for me, because I don't sit in this feeling, or this isn't working for very long. Like, I usually have a couple times that it pops up. I'm like, okay, this is a problem. We got to fix it. Or, this has been going on for like the last 3 weeks. What's happening? And I will evaluate it. So I can't sit in that frustrated space for very long. I have to take action.
Yeah, which is a good thing. Like, I've had neck pain for a while, and you're like, go to the chiropractor, and I'll deal, I'll manage it. I'll manage that pain.
Right.
I'll deal with it. I'll, like, whatever. And then I will finally go. I did last week, and I feel so much better.
Right.
I think that's something that I've learned from you as well, is like, you don't have to just deal with these things. You can take action. Like, you can make a plan and fix it, rather than waiting and putting it off or whatever. I will say, though, when you told me that you felt like your medication wasn't working, you wanted to go see this new doctor and be reevaluated, I didn't really notice, like, you've been dealing with perimenopause symptoms for
like 2 years.
Yeah,
probably,
a while. Yeah. And so, not that those symptoms masked the, issues with your ADHD, but I think that you just have a good handle on it, and like, you're able to manage it. And so,
right, for the most part,
I wasn't really noticing a huge difference in the kind of the management of the ADHD symptoms. Obviously, it's you who's dealing with it, and so they would be way more prevalent to you. But like, I wasn't noticing it necessarily, other than like sleep things, and maybe like you would mention concentration issues. But my God, we have so many things going on.
Right.
It's just constant movement, and so I think I got distracted from it, and I wasn't noticing. So it's good that you were able to say, I don't think that my medication's working how it should be. I need to go have get a second look.
Right. And I think the thing is that's why actually, like, pausing and going, something's not working. I need to do something about it. What do I have control over? What can I do? Because I think you would have noticed it more if I just let it go.
Oh, probably.
Like,
yeah.
It would have gotten to the point where I'm like, my struggles are now impacting everyone. And that's where nobody wants to get. That's where, like, relationships become strained. There's resentment. Like, you could be like, you've been feeling this for how long? Why didn't you go do something about, you know what I mean? Whereas, like, I think sometimes starting off and being like, okay, what can I figure out? I don't need to go do something immediately the first time I feel the first, symptom or the first initial struggle. But again, pay attention to the patterns, pay attention to like what's really going on. And I've said it a million times, but when you feel just like off, you don't have to know exactly what's going on. Something's off. Like, listen to your body and go, I don't know what's going on. I don't know. There's no reason I should be in a bad mood. Why am I in a bad mood? And I just like, I need to like shift something today. Maybe, go for a walk, go do something different to mix it up and see if that helps. And then once you get to a point where you feel like, I've tried a bunch of different things and this is still my overall feeling, like, you got to get it checked out. So, and knowing that there's got to be a better way, and understanding intellectually all of the things that I've been dealing with, I went in to this, reevaluation that actually took 2 sessions to properly diagnose. But my official new diagnosis is ADHD, C-PTSD, and OCD. And the massive emotional impact of finally having that clarity, like I was driving home from my appointment and I just began to cry. Like, I mean, they were tears of relief, like feeling that my pain and my struggles were, acknowledged, and the validation of all the work that I've been doing, and the fact that I was able to pause and take the time to go get this evaluation to, to get a better handle rather than just continue to struggle and think, well, there's nothing else that can be done.
Yeah.
It was, it was like relief, really.
Well, that's why proper diagnosis matters. So you can't heal what you can't name. Toxic people, emotionally immature people, not only live in denial, but self-reflection is something they won't do.
Right.
So pretending something doesn't exist or not addressing it means they're also not healing any of it.
Right. So, like, if you get a misdiagnosis or a partial diagnosis, like, you're going to have incomplete treatment and ongoing suffering. So it's not that you're like, I think a lot of people will say, oh yeah, like, you can, anything you're looking for, you can find, right? Of course. But I also think if you're going to this, psychiatric nurse practitioner who's trained to, figure these things out and say, this is what's going on. This is what, I've been experiencing. Please tell me if I'm way off. Tell me if it's something else. Tell me like your recommendations, because what's happening right now isn't working. And so if you find someone who, is, misdiagnosing or really leaning towards one thing, just keep looking, like go for a second opinion. Just like, the danger of the ADHD only thinking when there are other conditions, like anxiety, like C-PTSD, depression, OCD, autism, like all of the different coexisting conditions. I think it's like 80% of people with ADHD have a coexisting condition. So it rarely stands alone anyway. So if you're only getting that diagnosis, it's only part of the picture at least 80% of the time. So even if you're not aware of it, or like, I mean, a lot of times I thought my OCD was, I'm just a weirdo.
Well, you are.
Yeah. No, but I would just be like, oh gosh, like, I mean, OCD it's embarrassing because they're compulsions that don't align, with who you are. But I mean, we'll get into that. But like, for example, like our older son, Wyatt, his first psych evaluation, they're really pushing, you remember this? Like the anxiety side. Yeah. Because he was the ADHD, anxiety combined diagnosis. But we, as his parents, could see that his ADHD struggles were making him anxious. Mm-hmm. Even with some of the medication trials, if he did like a long acting that, can take up to an hour to get into your system, that first hour in the morning, he was so anxious about his day. And then it was really hard for him to turn it around once his medicine actually kicked in, because he was already, that motor of his anxiety was already up and running, right? So, it's just like my OCD. It came out of my need for control over my ADHD symptoms when I was a kid. My OCD started like 4th and 5th grade, right around the time when I first was going through puberty. And I would get up at 5 a.m. to get ready. I had like everything had to be right angles. I mean, that comes from trying to gain control from my very controlling household and traumatic childhood. But I also wasn't getting any support for my ADHD symptoms, and I didn't know what was going on. I was trying not to mess up and, be this, which I didn't know at the time, but this ADHD getting in my way and causing me to make mistakes. So my OCD would present more often as a way for me to feel like I was in control when I felt so out of control and had nowhere to turn. And this affects everything, from therapy, medication, parenting, relations, and especially your self-talk. And for ADHDers, especially those of us who were scapegoated, will internalize the wrong narrative. Like, I'm lazy, I'm dramatic, I'm too much, I'm not enough. All those things. So diagnosing it doesn't make your struggles worse. It just makes them make sense. It also doesn't make them better getting the diagnosis. It allows you to have tools or to be able to gain understanding of what works for you and to be able to move forward like that.
And I think we've talked about that a lot with Wyatt's diagnosis. Like, just getting the diagnosis doesn't solve the problem whatsoever.
Right.
Then it's like you said at the top of the episode, I have a name for it. What are all the symptoms? Now I can more clearly define the symptoms, I should say. Like, some of the symptoms, but can more clearly define the symptoms. Here are treatments. Here are coping mechanisms. Like, you have a lot of work to do after the diagnosis.
Right.
That's the most important part. The diagnosis just allows you basically access. It unlocks the toolbox.
Now you have access to medication, which is, again, only part of the treatment.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
But I think that's an important part, is that, like, it's not, you're relieved when you were driving home, you started to cry because it was a relief, and it was like validation that my symptoms have been off, and it's a lot. But that initial diagnosis, you kind of had that epiphany, that light bulb went on, but you didn't just stop there and say, well, I have ADHD. Get me on the right medication, and that's all I have to do. You dove in and did more work, which is the most crucial aspect, I think.
Well, and I think there is, like, if you first start taking medication for it, there is also such a relief when you start taking the medication and going, hold up, I could have been feeling normal, because that's what ADHD medication does when you're actually when you actually have it and you take it. You feel normal. Like, you don't feel, high or, oh my God, I'm getting so many things done. That means you shouldn't be taking it. It's like, I can actually, like, calm down. Like, there's there's memes everywhere about, if you can take ADHD medication, stimulants, and take a nap, you have ADHD, because it actually calms you. And I think there is such a relief when you first start taking the medication that you can kind of sit in that for a little while where, oh, this is awesome. Okay, this is what I've been needing. But then the natural progression of, like, I'm not dealing with behavioral stuff. I'm not, diving into the therapy. I don't really understand, what are all of these symptoms ADHD, or are they something else? Because a lot of times, even in my initial diagnosis, when she would tell me something, I was like, oh, that's ADHD? Oh, I didn't realize that, So actually, diving into that.
You could also, like, when you talk to Erin about nutrition too, like, you can, knowing that is the diagnosis, you can start to dive into things that help you throughout the day. Like, what foods should I be avoiding? What foods would help me?
Yeah, how much sleep do I need? Is sleep, that much of an issue? Sure was. I never tracked my sleep before I got diagnosed with ADHD, and I guarantee it was a huge problem. But yeah, like, I was always involved in sports, so physical activity, that helped me, but I didn't realize that it helped me back then. It's just what I did, right? So there's lots of, aspects of it, but the diagnosis is what catapults all of that.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about ADHD trauma overlap, as well as OCD and ADHD in future episodes.
Yeah.
But what did this updated, accurate diagnosis unlock for you?
I think like the understanding of C-PTSD a little bit more, like my emotional dysregulation, which was already a prominent struggle, and it is for any of us ADHDers. It's an even bigger issue when emotional neglect and frustration with not being understood by your core, family members is present. My people pleasing and hypervigilance, like realizing, what I thought was just like part of my personality was actually a trauma response. Like, for example, I always wanted the connection and received the feedback that I was annoying, I was too much. Like, they didn't want a connection with me, so what do I need to do? I need to change myself in order to have a connection with them. And it was unsafe to be my authentic self. So I became very hypervigilant, and I'm already naturally hypervigilant with ADHD. So it was constantly on guard for emotional threats like rejections, criticisms, abandonment, mood, tone, energy shifts of people in the room. Those things, having both ADHD and the complex trauma, they make each other worse when you're in that situation. And the family scapegoating dynamics, which we talk about every single episode, but just understanding that I was minimizing the attacks I received. Like, I would refer to it as they're picking on me rather than the reality that I was being told they don't approve of who I am over and over and over. And I spent almost 4 decades trying to make them accept me. So, like, seeing that, especially when it was like, hey, I'm doing all this work, I have all this support for my ADHD, I'm tracking my sleep, I'm making, these food choices, I understand it, I'm advocating, I'm coaching, I'm doing all these things, and my family is still acting the same. Like, something else is going on. So the C-PTSD was like very obvious. But the OCD recognition, understanding those intrusive thoughts and mental loops. So rumination is a big part of OCD, and it's definitely something that I can fall into. And the rumination is in an attempt to figure out that whatever the worry is that comes up, and feel more certain that I have solved it, found a way out of that worry. Because the worries aren't just like, it's not a, general anxiety. The worries come from the information coming at me. And so I'm responding in a way to try to figure it out. In a sense, it's a compulsive need to know for certain. And obviously, there's situations where you just can't do that. So you need to be able, to work through it and not let it, consume you and pause you from doing the things that you want to do, or even make you act in ways that don't align with who you are,
That we kind of talked about that too in like situation prep, where
Right.
you would have regret when we kind of walk through things. I don't feel like I would have reacted that way if I was prepared, right?
Yeah. And I think there's, the rumination of like leaving a night out and being like, oh my God, everybody thought I was annoying, and sitting with that it'll drag you down and make you want to self-isolate and feel like, oh, nobody likes me anyway.
Then you don't go to the next outing.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe that was never even a thought at all.
Exactly.
But sometimes it is. So, and I stopped mistaking these compulsions for personality flaws. Like I said earlier, I thought I was just a weirdo, but I would be like, what is my problem? Why am I doing this? Like, this isn't, like, I know, logically, I don't need to do this. And it's not like I was like, oh, if I don't do this right, my kids are going to die or something like that. It was just, my compulsions are like, if I don't rotate those towels and I don't put the towel, I tried this the other day, by the way. So we have this bin of like old crappy towels, like that we used to wipe the dog's feet, or you take to the playground to like wipe off slides and stuff. They're just old towels. Everybody's got them. They're in the basement. I have to rotate all of the clothes. So like all of our clothes, and I don't do yours, but I would if it, rotated. But I tried to just take the clean folded towel and just set it on the top. Instead of rotating it, putting it on the bottom, so that equal use is like the idea in my head that I've had literally since 5th grade. I've done this. I tried just setting it in the bin, closing the bin, setting it aside. I went about my day, went upstairs, and I was like, I can't do it. I had to go back, and I had to and it's like the second I put the towel on the bottom and everything was rotated, obviously it's more work. It takes more time to do this, right? But as soon as I did it, I didn't think about it again. So I was even talking to her about that at my evaluation. I was like, it's so embarrassing to like talk about this, because I know, like, I just think I did it the wrong way. Right?
Yeah, okay. So with laundry in particular, like that thing, I appreciate that you do that, because it extends the life of that garment. And you do it for, like, you take
all the kids,
meticulous
right,
care of our laundry. All of our kids' clothes, like, our kids, like, Wyatt has had clothes that he's passed on to Otis, that Otis has then passed on to a cousin, and then my sister's kid, and then she's resold those clothes.
And they're 3 boys.
Yeah, 3 boys. So, like, it's gone through 3 different boys, and then it's been resold, like, on Facebook Marketplace for a good price, because it's in such good condition. And that is because you took care of it so well that it was able to, like, so I'm not saying, oh, we'll be able to resell those towels someday, but like you're saving us having to buy more towels, or, like, you know what I mean?
Right,
like,
and
it's a little thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I understand why you're like, I had this compulsion. Like, I couldn't go through the rest of my day without putting that towel on the bottom.
I mean, I couldn't get through like 10 minutes. I came up and tried to focus on other stuff, and I couldn't.
It's very...
It is funny.
I'm finding this out right now.
I know. I have not said this. So the thing is the logic behind why I'm doing it, I feel like it's a rational reason. I think the compulsion is irrational. I should be able to just put it in there. But also, the fact that when I do it, now I've been doing it since 5th grade. It's like part of me, to the point where I just automatically do it, and it doesn't take extra time. It's not consuming me. It's not like... I mean, yes, it takes a little extra time, but it's not significant to where I'm like frozen for the day. I have to keep repeating it. But what happens with these perimenopause symptoms, and I'm not able to perform these, like, they're called rituals, I will feel like everything's a mess. I will feel like everything's overwhelmed. I don't even have the energy to do this, but I know that if I don't do it, it's going to sit in my head and tell me that it's wrong. And again, my OCD developed as a kid with undiagnosed ADHD in a home that was super controlling, with high expectations, with no support or, allowance for mistakes. So I did this as a safety measure, and now it's not a safety issue. So I just need to, now I just recently was, finally diagnosed with it. Now maybe I can take a closer look at ways in which I can begin working through that. And like you said, we're going to talk about that in another episode more in depth. But how ADHD intersects with all of these coexisting conditions, whatever you have, it just makes the other conditions harder to recognize earlier, or it makes the ADHD harder to recognize. So, like thinking my ADHD is what caused me to, or caused them to treat me poorly. And then thinking, oh, they just misunderstand. Now that I'm diagnosed, they'll understand. But then seeing like the confusion came with like, oh, they don't want to understand. They don't want that. So when you finally see the full picture, you can kind of stop fighting yourself and being in that, state of confusion, because you're not sitting in that anymore. Now you say, okay, I have this diagnosis. I can start supporting myself by giving myself what they never could or never would, right?
Yeah. So what should you do if you are undiagnosed or suspect that you're misdiagnosed?
I think at any point you deserve answers. And I mean, it's never too late. People get diagnosed into, their 60s, 70s. So I think some, red flags, things to be aware of that you might need a reassessment or to be assessed initially is my ADHD treatment isn't working the way I expected. Or, maybe there's something, for a while I didn't understand the sleep component. I didn't understand, the food component, the amount of protein we need and all of that. Listen to that episode with Erin about the food. But like, I also related to the C-PTSD symptoms that I was, finally understanding through, not only my therapist, but all the books that I, have been reading, like Dr. Sherry's book and so many others where I'm like, okay, I know I don't have the label, but I definitely have C-PTSD. And, like I said before, if something feels off and I just can't explain why, figure it out. Like go, to your primary, start there. But, and a proper evaluation is hard to get, especially for women, late diagnosed adults. It's not easy to find either the psychiatric nurse practitioner or a neuropsych to diagnose to begin with. But once you do, they just need to fully understand how your symptoms present and how, you can ask them, how many people with ADHD have you treated? Or, make sure they're able to see that the inattentive side of ADHD, because a lot of women present that way. I didn't. I was the total tomboy, hyperactive. Just if I would have been a boy, I would have been diagnosed. And their struggle. Well, and if I would have been a boy, I would have been accepted, possibly, because who knows? Doesn't matter. I'm not. So, but when women tend to minimize their struggles too, due to societal expectations and the thought of being a whiner. If they truly express their struggles. So, you're going into the doctor and being like, yeah, it's not that bad. Or, a lot of time, no, you really need to tell them. And I think it's hard to balance, I don't want to sit there and say all these things are happening and I want my life to, and they're going to think I want to kill myself and they're going to put me on suicide. No. Just slow down and tell them, no, I experience this every day. Or, go through your symptoms and track them. That's the best way to do it, to take to a doctor. Find the tracker on Attitude Magazine, track your symptoms so that you can take it to the doctor. That gives them a better idea, and you don't have to feel like you're explaining or you're minimizing or, you're making it sound worse than it is. Because I think a lot of times we think we're making it worse than it is, but we're not even scratching the surface, So you want to make sure that you are speaking to a trauma-informed, like a neurodivergent-literate professional. So ask them. Ask your primary care if they have someone in mind. If you have a friend with ADHD or someone who has a child with ADHD, ask them. Research your area. Ask for a consultation. And then, again, just like therapy, or any professional that you go to see, if you don't really feel like there's a fit, or you feel off about them, go to somebody else. Attitude Magazine, again, I'm really hyping them up today, but seriously, there's tons of resources for this, but they actually have a research your area feature, so you can find professionals in your area, and it kind of depends on where you live, and it may be a stretch. Like, I think when we were first looking, it was like New York City was the closest, and that's like 6 hours away. But you can look and say, okay, that's not close enough. So next step, maybe your local hospital. They usually have like departments that are all, although they're busy and sometimes they take a really long time to get into in the hospital unit, if you call them and they're filled up for 11 months, they'll say, we recommend this other person at this other, if it's a private practice or if it's this group of care people.
Yeah, I think that it's important to talk to people that who are comfortable talking about it. Because, like, if you need a plumber, you can go on Yelp or Google or whatever and find plumbers in your area. But you have no idea what their reputation is. You're relying on online reviews.
And sometimes the people just have more money for more ads, so you think that they're good, or
If you can go to your neighbor and say, hey, I have a plumbing issue, who do you use? They can say, oh, call this guy, he always takes care of me, whatever.
Right.
For us, when we were looking for diagnosis for Wyatt, we had a really hard time because we didn't know anyone who had kids our age or had a child our age who they suspected had ADHD. You had ADHD. You recognized the symptoms. That was the impetus for us to seek out the diagnosis. But, like, we didn't really have those resources. We didn't have anyone that we could ask these questions to. Like, hey, how does it present? What are you finding that helps? Who do you go to for treatment or diagnosis? Who do you go to for help? So we were relying on his primary.
Right, we were tracking it with the primary.
Yeah, and then they would recommend like a general, like, in our area behavioral practice, which didn't help at all because we were already doing those behavioral things, and they basically told us that.
Right.
But if you have, ask families, like, if you have someone, if you know someone who have kids who you think might have ADHD, talk to them about it. It's really helpful. And especially for women who think they might have ADHD, you're a resource, but, like, talk to other moms, talk to other parents and adults in your neighborhood or at work or, like, wherever you can find that resource. That is really helpful.
And I think more people are talking about it now. Like, people will say, "Oh my gosh, I went to get my kid diagnosed," or my kid was in an evaluation, and they're listing off all the symptoms, and I'm going, "Oh my God, that's me." A lot of people our age will get diagnosed because they're getting their kid diagnosed, and a lot of times you also need to look at through your insurance, like, okay, what's in my network, and then just try a couple of people. Like, it's definitely time consuming, but I promise, once you find the right person, it makes all the difference. When you get a full treatment plan, the weight as a parent, the weight as a person with the diagnosis is lifted. Not that you don't still have work to do, but the weight of being confused and not understanding and just, like, scraping by disappears. So for me, getting the full diagnosis, I realized that, my healing actually helps support my children better and our family and communicate. So, like, when I didn't fully understand my situation, or, I just didn't have, not that I didn't feel confident in, these diagnoses that I received, but I just was like kind of carrying it and like not still struggling with my symptoms. And I felt like there were times where, you know, I'm a loving, caring parent and I want to make sure they don't suffer unnecessarily like I did. And so I'm exhausting myself doing the work to heal myself while being the support to my child so that they don't experience what I did. And I think if I didn't do all the work on myself and the self-reflection and all those things, I could not show up like that. And there are times still with, you know, the C-PTSD and the family stuff that still comes up, the scapegoating and the smear campaigning and all of that. When it comes up, I do feel like, and I'll talk to you about it, like, oh, I just don't, like, I can't function, or I'm really upset. I need time by myself, and I'm not able to be there for the kids. And that makes me, then my anger grows about like, they're, you know, even though we're no contact, there's things that are happening that would take me away from that. And it's been a long time since that's happened, but, you know, I want to, you know, give my kids the example and not, you know, have a lot of regret in that situation. And I think when you have the full picture of what, you know, you've been going through and you're constantly, you know, assessing it and, you know, really trying to understand, your child sees you doing that. So when you see your child like advocate for themselves, or you see them with a higher emotional intelligence than most adults, it's such a proud feeling that it makes like all the hard work worth it and all the things. But I mean, I kind of say, like, you know, when people say you forget about how much pain childbirth is, like, once you're holding the baby, like, I don't agree with that, like, at all. But I think you remember the pain, but you realize that the pain is worth it. So even though it's painful to reveal some of these things from your childhood, or really understand, you know, the malicious acts against me that not only happened in my childhood, but are still happening, you know, I'm breaking these generational patterns even when I'm exhausted so that the toxic abuse doesn't continue. And I'm going through all of that pain, and I'm, you know, enduring what I didn't deserve, but am stopping it with them to protect them. It makes it worth it. You know, like, it's exhausting, it's painful, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
In the end.
Yeah. Like we said earlier, diagnosis doesn't fix everything, but it opens the door for support and healing that you actually need.
Yeah. And the reevaluation was emotional, validating, and honestly, you know, life-changing to be in that spot. So if this episode hit home for you, subscribe, leave a quick review, share it with someone who is questioning their own diagnosis. It helps more ADHD scapegoats find their way here. If you're navigating this and you want to connect, reach out via DM. If you're a parent trying to support your ADHD child while still making sense of your own brain, let's talk. My ADHD with Angie coaching program can help you. You don't have to do this alone. You're not the problem. Till next time.